Okay, welcome to video 9, in which we will look at 4 muscles. The 4 muscles we're looking at in video 9 are Biceps Brachii, Triceps Brachii, Brachialis, and Coracobrachialis, not necessarily in that order. Okay, so let's take a look. So here we're looking at the superficial layer of muscles. We can see all of them here. We just looked at pectoralis major in the last video. We're going to get rid of pectoralis major and there's pectoralis minor that we also just looked at. And we're going to, let's get rid of another layer. And here's the first muscle we're going to look at right here, coracobrachialis. So coracobrachialis is a small, I think of it as, kind of a helper muscle. It's deep to biceps brachii, it's deep to pectoralis major, we saw, and it is deep to deltoid. Its name tells you the attachment, so coracobrachialis. Coraco refers to the coracoid process, brachialis refers to the upper arm. So this muscle goes from the coracoid process of the scapula to the shaft of the humerus. Well, let's not get into actions just yet. What else do we need to know about coracobrachialis? It is one of 3 muscles that attach to the coracoid process. In the last video, we saw pectoralis minor attaching to the coracoid process, and here's coracobrachialis, and then we're about to see a 3rd muscle that attaches to the coracoid process as well. So small muscle that moves the shoulders, kind of a small helper muscle. That's coracobrachialis. Let's look at biceps brachii. Biceps brachii has 2 heads to it, and that's what its name tells us. Biceps, bi means 2, and seps means head, referring to the head or the belly of the muscle. So biceps, 2 head. Brachii, of the upper arm. Let's look at the short head of biceps brachii. Short head of biceps brachii attaches to the coracoid process of the scapula. So there is muscle number 3 that attaches to the coracoid process of the scapula. Long head of biceps brachii attaches to the supraglenoid fossa of the scapula. If we can see that right in there, the supraglenoid process of the supraglenoid tubercle, of the scapula. The long head tendon then goes down through the bicipital groove, so that right there is what the bicipital groove is named for, is for that long head, the tendon of the long head of biceps brachii. And so then the 2 heads, the short head and long head, are going to come together and form one common attachment down here. So biceps brachii crosses the shoulder joint and crosses the elbow. So we're going to see movements at the shoulder and movements at the elbow. But down here, its attachment is at the radius, if you can see that in there. So that is the radius, and that's where biceps brachii is attaching. So what does that mean? That means that not only does biceps brachii move the shoulder and move the elbow, it also moves the radial ulnar joints, because remember that the radius is the moving bone in when the radial ulnar joints are moving, and so we're going to see radial ulnar action happening with biceps brachii. Let's look deep to biceps brachii, and let's see, let me zoom in because it's hard to get this guy. There we go. This is brachialis. So we can see that brachialis is deep to biceps brachii. I'm going to fade biceps brachii so we can see brachialis better. Brachialis, unlike biceps brachii, does not cross the shoulder joint. So if we pull this down and see the shoulder, see, it only goes just above the midshaft of the humerus. So it only crosses the elbow joint. That's brachialis. On the distal side of the elbow joint, it attaches to the ulna. So the only joint that that brachialis moves is the elbow. It does not move the radial ulnar joint, and it does not move the shoulder. So brachialis just moves the elbow, and it crosses on the anterior side of the elbow. So can we guess what action it does on the elbow? Elbow flexion. You knew it. All right, let's spin her around here and take a look at our muscle on the back. So we looked at coracobrachialis, we looked at biceps brachii, we looked at brachialis. This is, and so on the anterior side of the forearm, sorry, not forearm, the upper arm. We have biceps brachii that has 2 heads, and brachialis that is a head. So there are 3 good-sized heads on the, or bellies of muscle on the anterior side of the upper arm. And similarly, we have 3 heads on the posterior side. But these 3 heads all form one muscle. So this is triceps brachii. Triceps means 3 heads. Brachii means of the upper arm. So let's take a look at each of these heads separately. This is the lateral head of triceps brachii. The lateral head does not cross the shoulder joint. It only crosses the elbow joint. This is the long head of triceps brachii. It does cross the shoulder joint, and we should be able to see where it attaches on the scapula. It attaches to the infraglenoid tubercle. So the long head of biceps brachii attaches to the supraglenoid tubercle of the scapula. The long head of triceps brachii attaches to the infraglenoid tubercle of the scapula. All right, and then the 3rd head of biceps brachii is in the middle, and it's called the medial head. Or on the app, it's called triceps brachii medius. But long head, medial head, and lateral head are the 3 heads of triceps brachii. So they are considered one muscle, however, because they form one common attachment down here. This is the triceps brachii tendon that all 3 of the heads all tie into. That tendon then crosses the elbow joint posteriorly and attaches to the olecranon process of the ulna. So crossing the elbow joint posteriorly, we're going to expect to see some elbow extension coming out of this muscle. And so of the 3 heads, though, of triceps brachii, only long head crosses the shoulder. So we will see some shoulder movements happening with triceps brachii, but primarily what it does is it extends the elbow. Okay, so let's come out of the app and take a look at a moving body and take a look at the actions of these 4 muscles. All right, actions of the 4 muscles in video 9. Let's start with coracobrachialis. So coracobrachialis, nice little muscle that just comes right down. It's deep, so it's difficult to palpate. You can't really see it, but it's going from the coracoid process of the scapula down to the midshaft of the humerus. It's going to be a helper muscle that does flexion of the arm at the shoulder, and it's a helper muscle that does adduction of the arm at the shoulder. So it's underneath here enough, because it's attaching to the coracoid process down here, that when the arm is in this position, it's going to be able to pull down and facilitate, at least. It's not a prime mover, it's a small muscle. But those 2 actions, flexion of the arm at the shoulder and adduction of the arm at the shoulder, for coracobrachialis. Biceps brachii, a bigger mover muscle, has a few actions. So remember that I mentioned that biceps brachii crosses the shoulder, it crosses the elbow, and it also has actions that it does at the radial ulnar joints. So let's take a look at the actions of biceps brachii. So remember, first of all, attachments of biceps brachii. Long head attaches to the supraglenoid tubercle of the scapula. Short head attaches to the coracoid process of the scapula. The heads are going to come together, form one distal attachment at the radius, and it attaches to the radial tuberosity, and there's a little addendum in the book to that. It attaches also to the bicipital aponeurosis, into the deep fascia overlying the common flexor belly tendon. What the heck does that mean? All right, we'll find it. Don't worry. Okay, so here's biceps brachii. So let's talk about shoulder actions briefly first. Shoulder actions for biceps brachii: shoulder flexion. Okay, so it basically, both heads come down and cross the shoulder joint anteriorly, and so shoulder flexion is the shoulder action that biceps brachii can do. Biceps brachii crosses the elbow joint anteriorly, so elbow flexion is what biceps brachii can do. And now, we should be able to find this tendon, actually, because this is a pretty superficial muscle. And so we can find this tendon and we can trace it down. And if you can palpate it on yourself, you may be able to feel where it goes deep in there and attaches to the radius. But there's also sort of a more superficial part that kind of splits off and attaches in a more general sense to the fascia of the proximal forearm, and so that gives it kind of a better grip at the forearm to be able to have a stronger hold to move the forearm when it's doing elbow flexion, and also help to kind of stabilize things a bit as it's doing its action at the radial ulnar joints. So what does it do at the radial ulnar joints? It supinates the radial ulnar joints. If you can feel your biceps brachii, you can feel that doing that. So if you have you already have the elbow in flexion, and then you supinate the forearm, you should be able to feel biceps brachii get shorter when you do that, and longer when you pronate. So supination, you should feel it shorten. So it's shortening, it's pulling up on the radius, and then pronation is going to lengthen, and a different muscle is doing pronation, and biceps brachii is relaxing and allowing that to happen. Okay, so those three actions for biceps brachii: shoulder flexion, elbow flexion, so that's easy, same, it's flexion at both of those joints, and then supination, which you should be able to feel happening. Supination, elbow flexion, or sorry, shoulder flexion, elbow flexion, supination for biceps brachii. Brachialis is deep to biceps brachii. Not so difficult to palpate. It's hard to see on the app, but it's pretty easy to palpate. It kind of makes up this bulk underneath biceps brachii, and what's interesting about brachialis is because it only crosses the elbow joint, and it crosses anteriorly. In the elbow joint's a pretty straightforward hinge joint. All it does is elbow flexion. So it's actually prime mover in elbow flexion because it concentrates all of its fibers just on doing that. So it's actually stronger at biceps than biceps brachii at doing elbow flexion. But the two muscles differ just a little bit. Biceps brachii tends to work more in a moving elbow flexion. So if you're moving something around, biceps brachii will be the one to do it, whereas brachialis it's often referred to as the workhorse of the arm. So it's the one that contracts, like if you're carrying something and you have your arms locked in a certain position so that you can carry something around, and we're just keeping the elbow flexed like that. That's when brachialis is working. So they kind of trade off and have slightly different fortes when it comes to elbow flexion, but they work together to get elbow flexion done. So those are the three heads of the anterior upper arm, so the two heads of biceps brachii and brachialis, and then we have three heads on the posterior upper arm that are triceps brachii that match up pretty well. So remember that only one of the three heads of triceps brachii crosses the shoulder joint. That's the long head, and so long head is attaches to the infraglenoid tubercle of the scapula, and so it's in position to extend the shoulder joint. So biceps brachii flexes the shoulder, triceps brachii extends the shoulder. So we're going to find that these two muscles make a nice antagonistic pair. Biceps brachii flexes the shoulder, triceps brachii extends the shoulder. What did biceps brachii do to the elbow? Flexion. What do you think triceps brachii does to the elbow? Extension. Okay, so, and then what about pronation, supination? Triceps brachii doesn't do pronation or supination. Why? Because it attaches to the ulna. The ulna stays put when you do pronation and supination, and triceps brachii attaches to the ulna. So so all it does is move the shoulder and move the elbow. So it does shoulder extension and elbow extension. Okay, so those are those four muscles. Pretty straightforward. Coracobrachialis, biceps brachii, brachialis, and triceps brachii. That's video 9. That's the end of week 3. The word for this video is triceps. Okay, video, let's see, 7 was rotator cuff. Video 8 was gnats that were flying in my face, and video 9 is triceps, our muscle that we're wrapping this up with. Okay, I will see you in video 10, and however, stay tuned for a little accessory video with some workout ideas, because one of your options for homework for these muscles, now that we have everything that moves the shoulder and the scapula, is to make them soar, because that's a great way to learn where they are, and you know for days where they are because you feel them every time you use them. Okay, so I'll see you in video 10.